Great. Hi, Siri, welcome. Good to see
Hi.
you. We are beginning a new series tonight. We've had a bit of a break over the busy holiday season, the first month of Tishrei of the year. And now we're starting again with a brand new topic. The topic that I chose for us to explore is Shabbat. And I've titled it An Oasis in Time. Now, one of the reasons, Shabbat is obviously very important, comes every week. So it's frequent in our lives and quite central. But in addition, this particular year, Rosh Hashanah, the first day of Rosh Hashanah was on Shabbat. So the Jewish year began on Shabbat, which obviously is no coincidence. And there's a Shabbat influence on the entire year to come. So I thought it would be appropriate to spend a number of sessions looking at the meaning, some of the deeper layers, and hopefully gaining a newer and different appreciation for this day that we know very well. So first, I'd just like to give us all a moment to get into the topic a little bit and think to yourself, or feel free to share. Why do you think that Shabbat is an important idea and an important concept? This is obviously going to vary from person to person. There's no one right answer. Maybe there's more than one answer that you have. But just to think a little bit about why is it important and why is it a meaningful day in your life, or what do you think it contributes to the world in general? Now I'm going to go back and we're going to really start at the basics with a question that I wonder if any one of us here has ever thought about. Perhaps you have. Where does the 7-day cycle of the week come from? Where does it originate from? Why is it that the week is 7 days? Why can't it be 5 days? If we think about the calendar of the year, did you want to say something?
Oh, no, you don't really want any answers is all I'm asking.
No, of course I do.
Oh, you do? I thought a lot of these were just thrown out. Creation story from Torah.
Exactly. That's exactly where we're going to go, because if we compare the 7-day cycle of the week with other cycles that we have, we'll see that it's very different. For example, the cycle of the year follows the seasons, right? It goes according to the cycle of the sun. There's a natural order that we're following that leads us to set up the year for a certain length of time according to the seasons. The cycle of the months follow the Jewish months. They follow the lunar calendar, right? As the moon waxes and wanes, it has a cycle of about 29 or 30 days, and that's how long each month is. So there's something for us to associate it with or to attach it to, which kind of makes sense. But the 7-day cycle of the week doesn't seem to come from any sort of natural specific order that we can observe in the world. Yet we see that universally, the week is 7 days long for everybody, all cultures, all religions. It doesn't matter where you live in the world. And there's actually an interesting text that I wanted to share with you, and I'm going to do that by bringing it up here on my screen. Oops, I think my slideshow may have disappeared. Sorry, just give me a moment. There we go. Okay, so it should come up in a moment. Okay, so we have over here the description of the creation at the end of the 6 days of creation, what happened on that seventh day. But before we get to look at that source, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. So you should see over here on your screen two boxes. We're going to start with the one that should be on your left where it says 57. This comes from a book called the Kuzari, which you may or may not have heard of, probably less likely to have heard of. It's not one of the main texts that are usually brought up. It was written by a medieval Spanish philosopher, Jewish scholar, and he was also a poet. His name was Rabbi Judah Halevi. And it's written as a story and a conversation between a king who was known as the king of the Khazars, which is why the book is called the Kuzari. And he was struggling with issues of philosophy and of religion, and he called on a Christian clergyman and on a Muslim, and finally on a rabbi. And most of the story is the discussion between the king and the rabbi explaining different basic tenets of the Jewish faith and philosophy. And the eventual end of the story is that the king and his tribe actually converted to Judaism. Now, whether or not the story actually happened is debated. And, whether it actually happened, or is it just that he wrote the story in order to be able to teach through it to the Jews of the time and to the world at large. This was completed in 1140. So just to give you an idea of the time period we're talking about. So anyway, at one point, there's a conversation over here. There's a question and an answer. So number 57, the rabbi says, did you ever hear of a nation which possessed different traditions with regard to the generally acknowledged week, which begins with a Sunday and ends with a Sabbath? So he's asking the king if he's ever heard of a different weekly cycle than the one that we know of, the 7-day cycle. How is it possible that the people of China could agree with those of the Western Islands without common beginning, agreement, and convention? Now, obviously, back in those days, the conversation and the flow of information from one side of the world to the other was very slow. And nothing like today, where globally, it doesn't matter where we are, we can all connect instantly and speak and meet about things. So what did the king reply? Let's move to the next box, 58, Al-Khazari, that's the name of the king. Such a thing would only have been possible if they had all come to an agreement. This, however, is improbable, obviously, because the nations are all in different places. This is improbable unless all men are the descendants of Adam, of Noah, or of some other ancestor from whom they received the hebdomadal calculation. So he's acknowledging that there must be a common root where it comes from, somewhere that it was passed down from, because unlike the Jewish lunar calendar or the solar calendar, there's nothing else for it to hang on. Naturally, just from something that's been observed in nature. So it had to have come from somewhere, some kind of source, because the nations of the world did not get together and agree on this in any way. So let's look at the real source where it does come from, which is the text, which is the story of creation. So here we're going right back to the beginning, to where God is just telling us in the Torah how things took place. So we have the Hebrew text, and underneath the translation, now the heavens and the earth were completed and all they contain, and God completed it. And God completed on the seventh day his work that he did, and he abstained on the seventh day from all his work that he did. And God blessed the seventh day, and he made it holy. So thereon he abstained from all his work that God created to do. So he had just created this wonderful world with numerous multitudes of species and creations and all sorts of beautiful and wonderful things. And then he stopped creating. And there's just a short commentary here that I added from Rashi, who brings different explanations on different parts of the verses. And he asks, what was the world lacking? Rest. The Sabbath came, and so came rest. The work was completed and finished. Okay, so we found the source. We've looked at the original. When did it actually happen? When did it come to be? 6 days of work, and then the seventh day on which we cease to work and we rest. And we do so because that is the way that God behaved. He created, he was active for 6 days, and then he, so to say, took a step back and he ceased creating, he stopped doing, and he rested. Okay, and then obviously later on, at the time of the giving of the Torah, in the 10 Commandments, God actually gave the Jewish people the commandment that because of the way that he created the world, us Jewish people should work for 6 days, and then we shall rest on the seventh day, on the Shabbat. So let me throw this question out to you. When you hear the word rest, or the concept of rest, do you think that rest is something active or is it something passive? Feel free to share your thoughts or opinions.
Passive, passive, because you're supposed not to do anything.
Okay, right. Resting, by its very nature, means that you're stopping, you're not doing, and that's very passive. Okay. Does anybody disagree? Okay, so far we're all in agreement. That's great. Okay. You're not wrong, Sherry, don't worry. So we're going to talk about this idea of rest because first of all, when we say that God rested, what does that actually mean? I mean, when God created the world, it wasn't as if God was working up a sweat and exerting muscles and straining himself to create the world. It was quite an easy process. It was a very easy process. God uttered the words to create the different creatures and they came into being. So when we say that God rested, what does that actually mean? God didn't sit down and have a glass of wine. That's not what happened. And furthermore, or more importantly, when we understand what it means that God rested, how does that teach us about the rest that we ought to be having on Shabbat? And is there also a way that we can actually bring it into the week that follows as well? So let's explore this idea of rest a little bit more. And I think this will give us a richer appreciation of Shabbat. So God, for the 6 days, he's creating the world. He is changing and molding the nature of the way that things were. First, there was nothing, and then slowly, one layer at a time, one block at a time, God introduced and created light and dark. He divided the seas. He produced vegetation, the sun, moon, and stars, all the different species of animals, and ultimately humankind. So obviously this was all a major change for the status quo that had existed up until then. In the beginning, there was absolutely nothing. And slowly but surely, God was changing that and exerting his influence and his control on what used to be. And that's really the mode that we are in during the 6 days of the week. Because aside from the fact that God commands us to keep the Shabbat, God also commands us that we should be productive during the 6 days of the week. And I'm just going to share the text with you so that you can see that clearly for yourselves. So this is the fourth commandment as it's written in the 10 Commandments. So I have two sides. The one on the right, which is the longer text, is from the 10 Commandments are written 2 times throughout the Torah. So the first text is from the first time it's written, when it's related after the Exodus from Egypt. The second one comes from much later on, when Moses is repeating the 10 Commandments to the Jewish people. We're going to focus on the longer text. So God tells the Jewish people, remember the Sabbath day to sanctify it. 6 days may you work and perform all your labor, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall perform no labor, neither you, your son, your daughter, your manservant, your maidservant, your beast, nor your stranger who is in your cities. So God is, aside from instructing us to keep Shabbat holy, God is also explaining to us, what's the week supposed to look like? The 6 days, these are days of work. These are days of productivity, of accomplishment, of having an influence, changing your environment, doing something to take control of and lead your environment in a certain way, making progress, right? That's what the 6 days are for. And then Shabbat, we stop from all of that, just to develop it a little bit more within the 6 days of the week when we are accomplishing and trying to be productive. Obviously, we have numerous directions in which we might be focusing on. We have a number of different roles, perhaps as a mother or as a sister or as a wife, as an employee or as a supervisor, a friend, right? Depending what exactly we're involved in. We have our family, we have our work, we have social responsibilities, perhaps we're volunteering. Whatever it is, these are all very different directions, and we have to often juggle many of these things at the same time. So the week obviously can be quite intense as we're trying to do the best we can on all these fronts and in all these areas. So do we really need to explain why at the end of the week we deserve to stop, put our feet up, take a deep breath, collect ourselves a bit, relax, and re-energize so that we can do it all again the next week? Of course, it's self-evident how beneficial it is to have that time, to have that day, to rejuvenate and to re-energize. Is this what Shabbat is? Of course, this is what Shabbat is. Shabbat definitely does give us this opportunity, and it's very needed and very beneficial. But Shabbat is also more than that and deeper than that. And we're going to look at that part of it now. So just like ourselves, we are comprised of a body and of a soul. There's the physical side of us, and there is the deeper spiritual soul inside of us. These are two aspects of ourselves. Obviously, they do hopefully work together and have a very strong association with each other. The same is true of Shabbat and many things in Judaism. Shabbat has a body and a soul. There's the more physical, tangible, practical aspects of Shabbat, and there is the deeper, more spiritual, loftier elements of Shabbat. And just like in order to appreciate the soul of the person, you connect to them on a physical level first, because if there was a soul alone nearby us as physical people, we don't know how to relate to a soul on itself. With Shabbat, the body of Shabbat, the tangible physical elements of Shabbat help us to enter into the spirit and the deeper meaning of what Shabbat represents to us and offers us. So what is the body of Shabbat? So first of all, obviously, technically, the time of Shabbat, approximately 25 hours starting Friday right before sundown until nightfall on Saturday night. That's the body, the time of Shabbat. The soul and the spirit is what do we do during that time. In a more detailed fashion, when we look at the observances of Shabbat, what do we actually do on Shabbat? So there are things that are more tangible, like lighting the Shabbat candles, making kiddush on a cup of wine, challah, a meal, all these different rituals which have different significance, which we'll discuss in a different class. This is sort of the structure of Shabbat, right? What we do to mark it and to celebrate it. Even other so-called mundane activities, when we do them on Shabbat, in order to take pleasure on Shabbat, they also are uplifted and are considered to be part of bringing the person pleasure and joy and rest on Shabbat. So, for example, even to sleep a bit more on Shabbat, because you have that time, that's also something that is in the spirit of rest and of pleasure and of enjoyment, and that's a very important theme in Shabbat as well. Actually, the word Shabbat, Shin Bet Taf, is also an acronym for Shina b'Shabbat Ta'anug, right? The word Shin is Shina, sleep, b'Shabbat is Bet, on Shabbat, and Taf is Ta'anug. Sleeping on Shabbat is pleasurable. So that, you know, that kind of thing. Eating foods that are more upscale, let's say, than you would eat during the week. These are all things that enhance the experience of Shabbat for the family. Then there's also obviously the things that we don't do on Shabbat. There's a number of different prohibitions, not to light a fire, not to use, not to turn a light on and off, for example. So these are all the body of Shabbat, the more tangible physical aspects of Shabbat, but they are a gateway to leading us into a certain, developing a certain spirit and a certain atmosphere through which we can really experience Shabbat in a deeper way. So let's look at that now and understand that on a deeper level. During the week, when we're being productive, when we are having an influence on our environment, when we're accomplishing things, we are very much in a position where we are acting as controllers, so to say, or perceived controllers of what is happening around us. Just like God during the 6 days of creation, so to say, is busy proclaiming through his actions that he is the master, and he is the one deciding how things are happening and where they are going. In a similar way, when we're trying to innovate in whichever field that we are in, we're trying to have an influence on another person, we're trying to educate or raise another person in teaching or in childcare. Whatever it is, we are working to mold and influence and change the natural state of whatever is taking place. When Shabbat comes along, we take a step back from all of that and we say, okay, right now we're not in this mode anymore. I'm not in the mode of changing, manipulating, innovating, transforming. That's not the mode that I'm in right now. I'm not trying to move something from one state into a new state. On Shabbat, I'm taking a step back from that and I'm moving above and beyond it to a state where I can just focus on the essence of everything. So we're looking into, instead of being caught up with the details of everything that we have to do in every single day, we are actually stopping to look at a deeper reality and a deeper level of existence to understand, where does all this come from? Where is it all going to? Why am I involved in the things that I'm involved in? And the fact that I can stop on Shabbat and not continue to do all of these important things means that I'm not the one ultimately in control. There is something greater, there is something higher. And that's something that Shabbat gives us the opportunity to explore every week. I'm going to share a short clip with you, which elaborates a bit on this idea, and then we'll talk further.
Shabbat is a majestic institution. The celebrated French naturalist Fabre once conducted an experiment with processionary caterpillars. These caterpillars get their name processionary because when you put them in a line, many of them in a row, they follow each other in a procession, and they do that for a very long time. So what this scientist did was took a flower pot, turned it over, and put the caterpillars in a circle on the rim of the flower pot, and so that they were all walking behind each other in a circle, one following the next in a procession. In the center of the flower pot, the scientist put food that they like to eat, and watched what would happen. What was fascinating is that the caterpillars followed each other for days on end in circles. And after about a week of it, they all started to die because they didn't eat. They were following each other. They never stopped for a moment to see where they were going, to see where their food was. You see, these caterpillars confused movement with meaning. And we often do that in life. Our time is obsessed with movement. We're obsessed with speed. Things that come instantly. And often we wake up in the morning and we rush to work. And we rush from work to home and then to sleep and to vacation. We rush. And days turn into weeks and weeks into years. And often, sadly, it takes a jolt, a tragedy, an illness for a person to stop and say, what is the meaning of all this? To stop the movement, to say, what is this about? What am I living for? Shabbat is 1 day in 7, where God says, stop, focus on meaning in life. Stop the movement, meaning, focus on soul, on God, on family, on relationships, on community. Meaning, focus on meaning. Don't wait for something sad to happen. 1 day in 7, I give you the gift of Shabbat. It's majestic, it's holy, it's good for the family. Shabbat.
Sorry. Okay. All right. So, as we just heard from Rabbi Greenberg with his example of the caterpillars in the experiment, during the week we can get very caught up. There's so much for us to do. There's so much for us to accomplish. We're often also pulled in many different directions, and sometimes those directions seem to be conflicting with each other. And you know, there's always an urgency. This can go and go and go without stop. But when we have Shabbat and we have that zone and that time that's created, a time to cease, a time to retreat from being active and changing and responding and reacting to all the things we have to take care of. We go into that place where we can actually stop and think, let's look at the essence, let's look deeper. Why am I involved in all of these things? Are they really at odds with each other? where's the common essence over here? Where is this all going? There's a story told of the first Chabad Rebbe, known as the Alter Rebbe. His name was Rabbi Shneur Zalman. He lived at the end of the 1700s, early 1800s. He raised his grandson, the Tzemach Tzedek, whose mother unfortunately passed away when he was a very young boy. And one time he was interacting playfully with his young grandson, and they were playing a little game. And the grandfather said to his grandson, "Where is Zayda? Where is grandfather?" So the little boy turned to him and he pointed to his face. So his grandfather said, "No, that's not Zayda, that's Zayda's face." So he pointed to his heart. So his grandfather said, "No, that's not Zayda, that's Zayda's heart." So the little boy is a bit baffled. He's trying his best. He's pointing to this part of him and that part of him. And every time the Alter Rebbe is saying, "No, that's not Zayda, that's this part of Zayda, or that's that part of Zayda." So the little boy gives up. What should he do? He's not coming to the answer. Okay, so the Alter Rebbe continues with what he's doing, and his grandson continues with whatever he's doing. A few moments later, the young boy turns to his grandfather and he says, "Zayda!" And his grandfather turns towards him and says, "Yes." And the little boy said, "That's Zayda." We can often feel very fragmented because we have work, we have home, we have family, and they don't always agree with each other in the schedules and in the priorities. And it's often difficult to figure out what comes first, what comes next. But really, there's obviously an underlying direction, purpose, theme, essence that we are following, somewhere that we are going. We're trying to build something, we are working towards something. And when we can go away from all these, from getting wrapped up in all these disparate, different, divided, distinct parts, like the different parts of the grandfather, and realize that really it is all one thing. There is one essence over here. There's one goal that we're trying to pursue. Whether it is to make, let's say it's to make the world a better place in all the different things that you're doing. So Shabbat is that day where we can focus on that common essence. We can focus on that main goal, and it brings us back to that place of wholesomeness, that place of completeness, that place of clarity. And it gives us, it puts us in a better position that when the following week starts, and we again are going back into all those different things that we have to, that are our obligations and our responsibilities, we have that renewed focus, and we're able to better take care of those responsibilities because we know why we're doing it. We're also better able to prioritize because if we know our end goal, then we know what takes precedence, what comes first or second. And it gives the serenity that we go into on Shabbat can actually be drawn with us through the week. Now, obviously, as the days go by, we can lose sight or lose hold of that feeling, but we don't need to despair because in a few more days, we're going to have Shabbat again. So it's really that gift that gives us the ability to ground ourselves again and to sort of go back to that core, go back to that center. Another thing to say in a similar point is that during the week, when everybody is busy with whatever their individual responsibilities and obligations are, our personal differences are much more magnified. One person is a teacher, another person works in a business office, another person is an accountant. Somebody is a good cook and somebody else likes to sew. Everybody is busy doing whatever particular hobby or profession they have. Shabbat, we don't do any of that. On Shabbat, we are focused on the soul level. And at the level of the soul, there's absolutely no difference. We're all a part of God. We're all equally holy. We're all infinitely holy. And we sort of all come to that same place of commonness and cohesiveness. So Shabbat really is a day of unity, a day that we can find unity within our lives, within the different things that we do, a day that we can find unity within our families, because whilst everybody in our family may be in a different stage and a different age and different interests, Shabbat we focus on the common values, and also in general with people around us, finding that common value and that common essence that we all share. Instead of trying to influence and change and move and make our environment progress in a certain way, we sort of sink in and become one with our environment and just appreciate what's going on around us, appreciate what we've actually been able to accomplish and how we are getting to our goals. So by resting, we're not just doing something passive. We're not just not working. Usually I would be making X amount an hour. On Shabbat, I'm not making any money. Usually I could make progress on my beautiful painting, and Shabbat, I can't do any of that. No, obviously there is the passive not doing, but in the non-doing, we are creating this very sort of active, beautiful atmosphere where our deeper self and our essence can express itself and be felt and have attention paid to it, so that we can know where we're going and what the next step is. We're going to look at this on a few different levels. In Kabbalah, in Jewish mysticism, we know that we speak of different realms, different worlds. Okay, there's this physical world that we live in, that we experience, but there are also spiritual worlds that exist, through which God sort of filters his intense godly revelation in order to be able to make this world come into existence. So just as we have these 4 different realms in creation, these 4 different worlds, which have various levels of godly energy and revelation in them, those realms also exist within us. They also represent something for us that we're able to do, and I'm going to explain. We're going to start with, usually when we talk about the creation of the world, we start from the top down, because we're explaining how God brought the world into existence from complete godly revelation to a physical world. But today we're going to go from our reality, from our world upward. So we have our world, which is called Olam Ha'asiyah, the world of action. The world of action because it is the only physical world. It's a world of where physical processes take place, and where the actual creation of God is manifest. So in the world of action, when we are trying to talk about rest, so action is obviously having a physical or tangible impact on the world. So for example, plowing a field, okay? Plowing a field, you're changing the natural state of the field. The natural state, whatever's growing there, the soil is however it is, whatever's growing is growing. If it's not growing because it's not good soil, because it's not enough rain, it's not growing. But if you take a machine and you plow through the earth, then you are preparing that ground to be able to receive seeds and etc., to be fertile for planting. So you're obviously creating a major change in that field. But even something as simple as boiling a kettle of water, you are also causing a change, a fundamental change in the water. The water is cold or room temperature, depending where you're getting it from, and you're subjecting it to heat or to some type of energy, and that is causing the water to boil. You are tangibly changing and manipulating a physical material. And on Shabbat, resting in the world of action is physical rest, not to plow the field, not to boil a kettle of water, just some examples. And this behavior of ceasing from active changing of things in the world reminds us and brings us the awareness of God as the creator of the world. Because we are not the ones who are in ultimate control, just as we are commanded to give up control for one day, to not do all of these things for one day. We are remembering that there is a higher power that is taking care of everything in this world. And again, this is something that spreads into the rest of our week, because during the week we can feel like we have to do this, we have to do that, we have to. We can become enslaved into our obligations and feel like and feel like we're working for them instead of them doing for us what we are trying to accomplish. But when there's a day that comes that there's absolutely no way that I'm doing any of this, I'm the one who exerts the control and not vice versa. So this is an idea that can also seep into our week when we remember that while something might be challenging, it might be difficult, we might have to grapple with it, it might seem overwhelming. At the end of the day, it's not the bigger power and it's not the highest force that exists. So that's on the level of action. Then we move up to Olam Hayetzirah, the world of formation, it's called. It's the first spiritual world, a step up from our world. And it corresponds to the world of speech, which even in speech, we can experience the idea of rest, because obviously there's different topics that we can speak about. We can discuss things that cause agitation. We can become angry at somebody and vent our frustrations on them. We can have an argument. But actually, we are told by the sages, our speech on Shabbat should be dissimilar to our speech during the week. It's actually a positive thing to try and elevate the speech that we use on Shabbat. So even another quote from the sages, on Shabbat, all can aspire to speak with a gentler, softer voice, even just to change a tone of voice, to speak more patiently, to speak more softly, to bring in that extra level and add to that restful atmosphere. If somebody's sleeping in your house and you want to be considerate and promote the atmosphere of rest in your home, you'll walk around, you'll talk more softly, you'll walk. When you walk, you might, take off your shoes or walk a little less harshly on the floor to sort of promote and create that atmosphere of peacefulness, of calm, of restfulness. And that is something that we are encouraged to do in Shabbat as well, because this obviously brings that feeling of rest even more to the fore and allows you to think more deeply into that idea, into focusing on the soul, on the essence, rather than talking about things that might be connected to work or stressful situation, or even if it's not, even if you have a travel, if you're flying the next week on vacation, to talk about traveling and everything that you're doing. While it's a very wonderful conversation to have and it's exciting and to look forward to, it's focusing on doing and going and active. And when we speak, when we choose to try and speak a little differently in Shabbat, to talk perhaps about the meaning of life, or how can we be kinder to somebody else, or whatever it is, that enhances and deepens this atmosphere even further, and brings us to that soul awareness even more. For example, if you've decided that you want to be more healthy in the way that you eat, so you can sit down to a meal that you've made that's very healthy and it's also very delicious, and you're sitting and you're eating, and all you're focused on is how delicious the food is and how tasty and how fresh and the textures or whatever it is. So yes, you're eating healthy, and yes, you're nourishing your body and you're still meeting your goals of healthy living. but you're not experiencing the feelings of health that you're receiving from the food at the time that you're eating it. But if you sit down and you eat your meal, the same meal, and you talk with your eating partner, whoever you're sitting with, and you say, these greens, they have antioxidants or whatever it is, and you focus on the health benefits that you're gaining from the food while you're eating the food, you actually are having the experience of how it's really nourishing you, and the tremendous physical benefits that it's providing for you. So in a similar way, we can sit at the Shabbat meal and have challah and have the kiddush and have a regular mundane conversation, which is absolutely fine. It's still Shabbat. You're still observing Shabbat. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's wonderful. As I mentioned earlier, the pleasure and the enjoyment of the meal is also key. And then there's also loftier, deeper levels where you can speak about Shabbat, or you can speak about the meaning of life, or you could speak about, values that you share. And that brings the atmosphere and the level of rest and of Shabbat to an even deeper level. There's an interesting story actually with a woman who relates how her father was a very devoted chassid of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, very dedicated to his causes, and he was a pious man. He tried to work on self-improvement and spirituality. And one day, in an effort towards that end, he decided with some friends that he wants to take on a pledge that he's only going to speak about the Torah on Shabbat, because Shabbat is so special and so holy, and he wants to promote the holy atmosphere. He's not going to speak about anything mundane. He's only going to speak Torah thoughts. The next time the family came to see the Rebbe, this man's wife, the woman's mother, mentioned to the Rebbe that her husband is now doing this practice. And when the Rebbe heard that, he disapproved. And he said to the man, I'd like you to annul your pledge. Because the Rebbe recognized that while it might be a lofty and wonderful goal for this man individually, as the father of a family, sitting around a table, and they can't have any conversations other than those of the Torah, and there's young children who might want to talk about their friends or whatever. For them, it's causing the Shabbat table to be uncomfortable or unenjoyable or too stressful that they can't talk about this or that. And the Rebbe said that there needs to be that enjoyable atmosphere. So we obviously have to keep these goals in mind and remember that the overall goal is that it should be a pleasurable, enjoyable day. But these ideas are just to bring a greater focus to the different areas in which it can spill into. So while you might not speak Torah thoughts the entire day of Shabbat, you can make a point of reading a small portion from the Torah at the Shabbat dinner table, for example. Just something that reminds us that we're trying to be a little more uplifted on this day. Now to move on to a deeper level, which we're going from action to speech, and prior to speech comes thoughts, which is the world of Bria, the world of creation. How can we have rest in our thoughts? I don't think this is such a difficult question, because I'm sure we've all experienced, either depending on our personalities, either on a constant basis or in individual times, depending on what we're going through, that we're thinking a lot about something is occupying our minds, and it's making us stressed or anxious or whatever the issue is, and it's weighing on us. And on Shabbat, we're really encouraged to try to quiet those thoughts, to put them aside, and to really be able to put our minds in a more restful state. So on the most basic level, even not to think about doing some work, let's say. But obviously on more subtle levels, not to think things that make you anxious or make you sad, to try and put ourselves in that frame of mind where we are calm and we don't feel worried about different things that we might be dealing with. Now, obviously, this is not a prohibition from the Torah. We're not forbidden to think these things. But again, if we want to think about ways to make the Shabbat or experience the Shabbat in an even deeper and more wholesome way, and to uncover that soul level to as great a degree as possible, these are all things that can lead us there even more. Because if we're not worrying about something, then we're able to better focus on our soul and on the meaning of things and where we're going, as we spoke earlier on in the class. It says about the Shabbat that we should, when Shabbat comes in, we should feel, and this is a quote, as if all your work is done. This might be a challenging thing to do. But if we're in the middle of an important business deal, if we're in the middle of writing a book, if we have an important piano recital coming up, if there's some project, there's some critical thing happening or in the middle, when Shabbat comes, it's like it doesn't exist. Shabbat is that transcendent day. We're able to just go above and beyond, even if it's not actually completed, even if you still have it waiting up ahead of you. We're able to take ourselves and put ourselves in that serene, tranquil mode. And again, that really, I think that's something that's very empowering. It's very empowering because instead of feeling like we have to be stressed because we have this important deadline coming up and we can't not be stressed until we've met that deadline. So really the deadline is exerting a lot of control over us. It's causing us stress. It's distracting us from our family, for example. It's not letting us stop and pay attention to the person walking past us on the street, whatever it is. But when we have that ability to say, today is Shabbat because if all my work's been done, no deadlines and no pressures and no upcoming or bygone things that I might be nervous about, none of those can get in the way. I am empowered, I am freed, I'm emboldened, and I'm liberated from that. And I think it gives us extra abilities that we didn't think or realize that we actually had. So this power of Shabbat to help us go beyond, to help us transcend. And then obviously from that deeper place, we're often able to attack a problem much more effectively. We can have a new perspective on how to take care of something that we didn't do before. We can rise above, and that can change our attitude to something, and then the whole situation somehow could change because of that. So it's really a very tremendous gift that we are given. And actually there is a place, a spiritual place, where the world does exist in a state of perfection. Because when God envisioned the world and he made a blueprint for creation, the blueprint was for a perfect world. The world that we live in now is not perfect at all. It's very compromised in many ways. And there are spiritual and practical reasons why that happened. And we have been working for many years to rectify that. This is a whole conversation and discussion and concept in its own right, which we don't have time to go into right now. But the fact is that we don't live, I think you will agree that we don't live in an ideal world. And we're going to get back to that ideal. So on Shabbat, when we put ourselves in a place where everything is completed and done and nothing is needing attention or unfinished, we are accessing that place of perfection. And all these things are really something that go back to being within the deepest and most inner core of something. The most of who we are, of ourselves, and of the purpose for which the world was created. So just another example, which might help to illustrate what we are trying to do with all these different levels and layers of Shabbat rest. Obviously, at the most basic level, the basic obligations, whether or not we are observing Shabbat in a practical sense, go according to the practical observances. But the inner dimension is obviously the intent behind all these observances. And when we live the spirit of the Shabbat, then we have the complete and whole picture. So, for example, if you're speaking to your sister or to your friend and they say something that really irritates you or that you disagree with very strongly, so you can take a deep breath and you can smile and you can respond very calmly to them, even if you feel very agitated inside, right? Is that good behavior? That's great. You've controlled your agitation, your anger, your anguish, whatever it is, and you've been civil or even nice and calm and patient when you answered. That's one scenario. Another scenario is the same person says the same thing to you, but instead of getting irritated or upset, you think to yourself, maybe she's going through a hard time, or I know that something is going, even whether you know or you don't know that something's going on in her life, maybe she's acting stressed out because of that, nothing to do with me. Or you could think to yourself, I think she misunderstood what I said, and that's why she answered me in this kind of way. And you don't get irritated. You're completely calm, you're completely patient, and you respond with genuine patience or compassion or whatever it is that the situation calls for. And you don't have to take any deep breaths. So in that kind of way, if we look at at Shabbat, we can light the candles, we can rest and read and refrain from doing whatever work we usually do during the week, and we are fulfilling Shabbat, right? We're being patient, we're controlling ourselves and being patient with our friends. Or there's the deeper level where, besides for the actual practical, tangible practices in ourselves, in the way we speak, in the way we feel, in the way that we are thinking, all of us is involved in the Shabbat, is involved in that level of rest, in that level of tranquility, focusing on the unity within everything that we are trying to accomplish, and the unity within ourselves and our family. And that's what we can gain from having a look at and focusing on the spirit and the significance and meaning behind all the things we do to mark, celebrate, and enjoy the Shabbat. So some of the ideas that we can take out of all of this, Shabbat frees us from being controlled by our weekday obligations. Instead of them taking over us, we're able to take control over them, because we can stop. We can say, right now they don't matter. I can get back to it and when I'm ready, in a different way, with a new strategy. There's something that's more important than all of this. There's some central vision goal that's driving everything, and I don't need to get caught up in the little minutiae of everything. Shabbat also reminds us that, besides for not being controlled by it all, these 2 points are kind of connected, but that there is a goal, right? We might think that we're working because we need to earn money. Of course we need to earn money, but what's the deeper goal over there? Why are we earning the money? Why are we trying to live our lives in this kind of way? Shabbat takes all the different things and says, and it gives us a chance to stop and think about what that purpose is. And so we're not feeling pulled in different directions, but like I said, it's all unified. And then, of course, if we're really able to sink in to that atmosphere and into that spirit, then it definitely affects us as we enter into the new week with a new clarity, a new vision, and a new goal. And it helps us approach things in a different, from a higher place, from a higher point. So I'm just going to share one very short clip to sort of wrap up the class tonight. So that was very intricate, very involved, that work of the woman who was creating that candlestick. And that's really good metaphor for we're involved in very intricate things, and we have to be very focused and wrapped up in each part of it. But what's the good of it if we don't ever have a chance to step back and enjoy the candlelight, to experience the results and the fruits of all the efforts that we are putting in? And that's another special gift that Shabbat gives us every single week. So I'm going to now end the